very much, Deputy Speaker. Let me say, as the Honourable Trollip says, he rises on behalf of livestock owners. If he's what's representing you, you're in a lot more trouble than you actually thought.
Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. One of those habits that I have throughout my life I developed is I'm a voracious reader. I love to read all kinds of things, mostly nonfiction, but occasionally I'll delve into fiction. But whenever I'm in South Africa, I tend to have this habit. I spend a lot of money in exclusive. I used to spend a lot of money at CNA, but they don't really have much anymore when you can find them. But I do still spend a lot of money at exclusive books. And I stock up on books that have come out since my last trip. With this most recent trip, I purchased a book that came out a couple years ago. And it's apropos because it's talking about agriculture. And it's an agricultural analyst who was highlighted in Anderson Cooper's propaganda piece on South Africa in 60 Minutes. And that is, of course, Wandile Silobo, country of two agricultures, lifting the term first discussed back in the 1970s by an analyst. But the book is interesting, and for a number of reasons. Now, I had not read it. I just started sitting down and reading it now. It's been sitting here for months. I hadn't gotten around to it. But just cleaning up some of my paperwork here, and I saw that I still had this book. So I started reading it. Now, it's interesting as you get in here, and he talks about what is hindering black farmers' progress? Now, many of these points he makes, several, I've made previously, and if you've been a long-time viewer of the program, you will remember them. He talks about lack of direction and critical and fast decision-making at the national provincial governments. That's what I've said all along. The government is the biggest obstacle to black farmer progress in South Africa, contributing more to the agricultural sector. Second, he talks about poor adoption of latest technology. 100%. I've also discussed that. Then he says, third, there's a lack of collaboration between government and the private sector. This one I take a bit of exception to, but he's close to the ground, so maybe he's more accurate in this. But I've often seen that the lack of collaboration is because of the government's corruption. I mean, honestly, if you're in the private sector, why would you work with a government that exists for corruption, bribes, and things like that? You're not getting anything accomplished helping black farmers by dealing with government officials who all too often are corrupt and expect bribes or patronage. So that's the reason for that. It's not the reticence of the private sector, in my view. It's the corruption and the corrupt nature of the government. Fourth, he says the inefficiency of many of the provincial departments of agriculture. Now, that's not one I've really highlighted. I haven't spent much time talking about the provincial departments of agriculture. I spent a lot more time talking about the Ministry of Agriculture, which really doesn't get the job done, and certainly isn't getting it done under its current leader. That would be John Steenhuisen. And he mentions here that in the former homelands, this is particularly exacerbated, saying that issues, programs for animal biosecurity, water infrastructure, farm security, and extension officers are lacking. And what have I told you for the past 6 years of my program about one of the biggest reasons why land reform has failed? He's not talking about land reform here, but I said one of the reasons land reform has failed because aspiring black farmers get no extension services. There are no extension officers to help them, or they're not up to the task. Growing up as a young farmer in Ohio, we had extension officers in every county. They were critically important to help farmers understand their role and access government programs and access government services, as well as other issues. Without extension officers, you leave these people up to their own devices. The government has a vested interest in the success of agriculture. After all, you need to feed your population. He said fifth is the delivery of critical large infrastructure projects. No doubt. And he states here, he mentions specifically the Phala Dam, which was delayed forever, finally went under an update in 2022 and added a lot of water available for farmers downstream. Sixth, he said in Northwest and Mpumalanga in the Free State, the failure of municipalities to deliver basic services such as water, electricity, and road maintenance have been among the bigger constraints. That's true in the agricultural sector, but that's just true for all of South Africa. The failure of local services to get their job done has meant that people are crippled. You can't deliver produce on roads that are non-existent. You can't deliver produce when your trucks can't get out of the mud because the pavement has worn away. And seventh, and the reason for this video, and most importantly, he said black farmers own a decent share of South Africa's cattle herd, about 34% of all South African cattle herd. Now that's interesting. So 1 out of 3 cattle are owned by black South Africans. It's not the picture that the ANC and the media and the EFF like to tell us about. It takes a lot of ground to graze cattle. How are these non-traditional farmers grazing 1/3 of South Africa's 14 million head of cattle when they have no land? Somebody's lying somewhere. He says, unfortunately, the poor implementation of animal biosecurity systems, deterioration of infrastructure such as dip tanks and fencing, and the enforcement of regulations on disease controls and the movement of animals have had a negative effect on the commercial aspirations of many black farmers. And those failures in animal biosecurity systems, deterioration of infrastructure such as dip tanks and fencing, and the enforcement of regulations on disease controls and the movement of animals has not only had an adverse effect on black farmers, but it's destroyed the cattle industry in South Africa. A country of two agricultures. I submit to you that an interesting book, an interesting read, and the analyst, Wandile Silobo, is pretty accurate in his assessment there, in my view. But it's not a country of two agricultures. It's a country of direct, intentional impoverishment of black South Africans so they can hold on to the issue of land, hold on to the issue of white privilege to retain power into perpetuity for their dumbed-down electorate. Many South Africans receive a less than adequate education. In fact, only a fraction of those who begin primary school actually matriculate at the end. And many that do matriculate aren't even functionally literate. With a voter base like that, it's easy to mislead them and lie to them about why black farmers fail and blame it on apartheid and blame it on Jan van Riebeck. Wandile Silobo mentions some of the reasons. And those reasons affect not two agricultures, but one agriculture. The movement of non-traditional farmers' cattle across the landscape and to stock markets in South Africa has exacerbated the spread of foot and mouth disease, an issue that Minister John Steenhuisen has refused to address.
Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts.
Now he wants to dance and crow and claim credit for record numbers of vaccination delivery.
The single largest procurement of animal vaccines in the history of the country arrived in the country last week. They follow on 2 million vaccines from last year. They follow on what is arriving on Saturday, Honourable Trollip, 1.5 million vaccines from Turkey, which will beat the record of the largest number of single vaccines.
From the moment he became Minister of Agriculture, his number one priority should have been not shipping stone fruit to Vietnam and dancing with Siviwe Garuba, Parks Tao, and Ronnie Lamola in Vietnam. Claiming he got a trade deal with China when the trade deal was with all of Africa. That shouldn't have been his focus. Negotiating with Iranians for God knows what food he's going to send there. His primary mission should have been to get this under control. He should have known from the outset that undersport was no longer available, that South Africa did not manufacture its own foot and mouth disease, that the disease is endemic in South Africa coming from wildlife, crossing the barrier to domesticated livestock. This should have been a priority. And if it wasn't a priority, we can even pardon him for that. There are plenty of problems in the Ministry of Agriculture he had to address, Department of Agriculture. But when he refused to address it in December of 2024, when it became more of a public issue, when I invited him on my program in April of 2025, and again in May, and he failed to show up, it should have been a warning sign.
What have you done in this House for the last 20 years that you've sat here? You've done nothing about foot and mouth disease. You've done nothing about it. And let's look, I will not take advice from you.
Here we are now, approaching 2 years since he became Minister of Agriculture, and now he's lambasting Athol Trollip, a former DA member, member of Action SA, in Parliament, attacking him for failing to address this issue for the entire time he's been in Parliament. Well, Mr. Steenhuisen, you were also in Parliament all those years. You even led a major opposition party. I don't recall loud instances of the DA screaming about foot and mouth disease and about the loss of undersport vaccination capability. Wandile Silobo warned South Africa, not because he cared about commercial farming, perhaps he does, but because he was writing a book about black farmers and the disparity between white and black farmers. And he warned people about the hazards that hinder black farmers. But those hazards affect everybody. The failure to increase irrigation and dam capacity affects all farmers, not just black farmers. I'm not criticizing his book. I'm telling you that he sent a word of caution out in 2023 when this book was published. A full year and nearly a half before many people even knew that foot and mouth was a problem, even though it dated back a couple years. And 2 years before John Steenhuisen ignored my request for an interview. And now here we are. him attacking Athol, Trollip in Parliament.
Let's look at your track record.
Honourable
Minister, you lost the family
Honourable
farm.
Minister,
You get kicked out of pack houses because people can't work with you.
Honourable Minister
That's your
Steenhuisen,
contribution.
there's a point of order. Honourable Reddy.
Methinks one doth protest too much, Minister Steenhuisen. Shame. What say you, South Africa? Was one duly prescient? I think so. Cheers.
Us in an intimidating, threatening manner. The House does not need to degenerate
Honourable
just
Member.
because he's no longer the leader.
Honourable Member, that is for me to decide whether it's threatening or not.
That's fine,
It
ma'am.
is
Thank
not
you.
threatening. Honourable Ntlangwini, what is your point of order?
Thank you, House Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we do realize that it's off-speak time now at Uber Eats, but we don't have the whole day.
Honourable Ntlangwini,
Please,
you
the
are
Minister
out of
answered it's
order.
done. It's off-speak
Honourable
now.
Ntlangwini,
We
you are
do
out of
understand
order.
that.
Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts.
I have now cautioned you members, you are frivolous and spurious. You are abusing points of order. Honourable Minister, please conclude.
I'm very happy to be called Uber Eats because unlike those members, I know a little bit about delivery. They couldn't deliver if they tried. The reality is we have a strategy. The strategy is rolling out and it's working. The caravan continues. The dogs will bark along the way. And of course, that's their job that they have to do. But this strategy is going to make sure that for the first time ever, South African
Honourable
farmers will have the
Steenhuisen.
benefit
Honourable
of
Steenhuisen, there is a point of order. Honourable Trollip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. You've just made a ruling that members are being flippant and spurious. The honourable member on the floor is the only person being flippant and spurious here this afternoon.
That is a matter of opinion. Honourable Trollip, Honourable Minister, please proceed. You have 7
pathetic.
seconds left.
Pathetic. That's the most
Honourable
pathetic
members.
intervention that I've seen in this House
Honourable
today.
members.
And this is a man who's been
Order,
there for almost 2
honourable
decades.
members,
And
order.
that's the best he can offer up. I rest. Thank you. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts.